I mean, you didn't ask me about, something I don't like talking about, but I'm going to just jump forward and address it. Mentally unstable people, or people that, there are people who believe in QAnon. There are people who believe the election was a fraud.
Yeah,
there are people who believe the COVID vaccines implant a chip in you. And there are also people that fall in that same thing, that don't want to accept the circumstances of Kurt's suicide for whatever reason.
Right.
My personal belief is that people are motivated by the fact that they truly loved Kurt Cobain. They loved his music. They feel a connection. And in the end, they feel betrayed. The idea that he would, quote unquote, leave them, they want to blame someone else other than him. And that would make their connection to him truer or easier to handle in a way. What I will say is that I absolutely researched every angle of Kurt's death with extensive documentation. I got numbers of people to talk to me. I was leaked medical information. I saw photos. I had all that information. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever. I looked at every potential crazy lead that Kurt's death is anything other than a suicide. And anybody who brings that up or thinks that, in my mind, are, number one, doing a huge disservice to Kurt Cobain, because in the end, his choice was to take his own life. And to deny that humanity of him is awful.
Yeah.
They're, number two, doing a horrible disservice to Kurt's family, who have to suffer from that. It's one thing to lose your father, your husband, your son to suicide. It's another to have that be internet Instagrammable speculation in a horrible way. And number three, they're denying the fact that this is a public health crisis that needs to be talked about and not denied. It's just like COVID. If COVID is something we are just denying, it's not really real. There are some bodies that prove that that's not the case, and that denial doesn't help our public health situation, nor does the denial in Kurt's case.
And I'm sure that was a hard chapter to write and a hard chapter to report and talk to people about.
Yeah, and if I did it again 20 years later, I think I would have inserted more. When you're telling a story in a book, you don't want to stop every paragraph and put a footnote in and say, this medical information was leaked to me from blah, blah, blah. That ruins the flow of a book. But in retrospect, I might have put more of that just because the denialism of people when it comes to suicide and drug addiction, I'm just shocked at. There's one horrible thing. I went to one of Kurt's closest people in his life at some point after I did the math and started adding it up. And Kurt did all these interviews where he said, I'm clean for a week, I'm clean for a month, I'm clean for 6 months, I'm great now. He said these in multiple interviews in the last year of his life. And virtually every one of those lines was untrue. And when I started to kind of track his drug addiction and the extent of what it was, and I added it all up, I was like, wait a second here. He's not sober then. And I wanted to believe it. I believed it when I read those stories. And, I get that now, but, addiction's a tricky thing. But I remember going and asking this person, I said, wait, was he using drugs during all this time when he said that? And the response was, duh.
Right.
And I was like, even myself, who grew up in a family with alcoholism, I want to deny it when it comes to other people. I even want to deny it in my own family.
It was shocking to know the extent, because I guess growing up as a fan, I didn't realize how early it started, and then how it just kind of kept going. I remember you had a conversation there where Kurt and his sister were sitting on like a swing set and talking, and he told her, I've been clean for 8 months. And you're like, no, he was more clean for like a week at that point, So
right.
I think he wanted to be clean, obviously, but
right. Yeah, I mean, if the breaking news of my book is that addicts that are in addiction lie, this is not. And that's one of the things that is so befuddling about the messed up people who think they read an interview Kurt did a month before he died where he says, "I've never been happier in my life." And then they believe that, and so consequently they think he couldn't have killed himself on April 5th, 1994. He said he was never happier in his life a month before. That must be true. And it's like, why do we want to believe the one thing he said in a press interview and not believe
right.
everything else we know about this?
Right.